Okay, so pleasure to be here and to tell you a little bit about what's in this book, Gastrophysics, the New Science of Eating, which is all around the senses, sensory design, but coming at it not as a designer myself, but as an experimental psychologist, kind of a measurement scientist in a way. And I suppose we sit somewhere between the creatives of the kitchen, the designers, and industry who fund our research, and try and provide the kind of tools to help measure the impact of certain design choices out there in the wild. And from sitting within a psychology, neuroscience building, take inspiration from what's going on elsewhere in the building and say, if the brain works like that, then maybe we should think about trying out a solution like this. And that's what this new approach is. Gastrophysics is an odd word, but you've got to have a new name, and lots of the other ones have been taken. It's there to kind of combining gastronomy on the one hand and psychophysics on the other. The gastronomy pointing at we're interested in nice food, things that we enjoy eating, that we look forward to consuming, that we remember with pleasure, rather than all the food science that does go on already in the food companies. And I remember in my days working with Unilever, where we'd have people coming in every Monday morning to taste chicken breast, so they could just adjust how much fish meal the chickens were fed before you could taste it on the breast meat. Monday afternoons was frozen Brussels sprouts, and you'd come in every day for a year, every Monday for a year, as they adjusted the formula, the freezing process. That is science and food. It's just not the kind of stuff that we're interested in, because there are many others who do it much better already. We want to go more towards the high end, working with people like Joseph Youssef, who was here in Maastricht just a couple of days ago, it turns out, and his kitchen theory design studio, culinary space in North London, with dishes like this, Pollen and the Bee, which is all sort of beautiful to look at, beautiful to taste, wonderfully designed, but also with a message about sustainability and changing us, nudging us more towards insect-based cuisine. And we're not going to get there by telling people that they should, that it's good for them, good for the planet. But if it's delicious to their taste buds, then just maybe we'll get somewhere. And I think the chef's creativity and insights is going to help put the science, our scientific understanding, in a way that speaks to people through their mouths and their minds. The other part is psychophysics, which is really kind of the sort of psychophysics as the systematic study of perception of people, giving them lots of different inputs, often on a computer screen, and seeing how they respond. So systematic analysis. I want to take, where we can, those approaches of psychophysics that are normally locked away in dark booths in psychology departments, and apply it in the real world. And there are challenges and difficulties there, but I think it's an approach that's worth following through. So if we were in the psychology lab somewhere like in Oxford, you might find a scene like this, where we're trying to assess the impact of the glassware, the shape, the weight, the texture, the feel, the balance of the glass on the perception of wine. We're trying to do it very systematically, very scientifically. So we've got the person's head clamped, they can't see the glass is being agitated on a stand, and that will allow us to isolate exactly what's going on, where any change in perception resides. Is it in sight, in smell, in the glass shape, in feel in the hand? That tells us something, but if we do just lab research, people will complain and say, well, you only tested weirdos, Western, industrialized, educated, rich and democratic boys and girls studying psychology. Doesn't apply to the real world. I'm different, I'm better. So we need to go out from, have that, which is scientifically controlled, but ecologically invalid in some sense, but also try where we can to do research in the real world, in restaurants, cafeterias, bars, science festivals, food festivals, wherever and whenever we can get in touch with some people and collect some data. And this kind of research in restaurants is unconstrained. You didn't control for this. Maybe it was sunny when you did that and rainy the next day when you had your other condition. It's sort of messy and noisy, and so people will criticize you as well for being poorly controlled, not very scientific. But our hope is, when we can, if we can do experiments both in the lab and in the real world, and we get a similar pattern of results, then whoever comes at us complaining about our approach, we can sort of bat them off to some degree and say, no, this is scientific, but it also has ecological validity. And why do we need it? Maybe, there are lots of great chefs out there making great food already, so why do we need a new science, the new science of eating? I think it's because of dishes like this, that when you see it, you have an expectation in your mind about what you're going to taste. Within the blink of an eye, 100th of a second, your brain decided that's probably a sweet berry, maybe strawberry ice cream. I like it, but it's not so good for me. I'd have to go to the gym to work off all of that, all through your mind, consciously or otherwise. But the thing is, it's not. This is actually a frozen savory ice cream created by the chef Heston Blumenthal in England a few years ago, and it's either smoked salmon or frozen crab bisque ice cream. And this was the dish that got the world's top chef interested in the mind of the person who was dining in his restaurant. And that's really the whole aim of the book, that the pleasures of the table, of the glass, of the plate, of the bowl, don't reside in the plate, the glass, or the bowl, nor in our mouth, nor our nose, but it's really the mind where all the senses come together, the sight, the sound, the smell, the feel, the taste, the texture of food, the expectations, the mood, the emotion, the context. It happens here, not in here, and hence we need to do things differently. And this was brought home to the chef when he made what he thought was a perfectly seasoned savory ice cream. They tried in the kitchens, it tastes wonderful, they just had a bit more, a bit less of this until they get the perfect formulation. And then if you're lucky, they will test that dish in the restaurant with some regular consumers and see, does it work in the restaurant or do we lose something? And when they tried that, the chef thought this was a perfectly seasoned ice cream. The regular diners in the restaurant, when they tried it, said, ugh, it's really salty, I don't like it. Has the world's best chef lost his touch? No, I think it's because the chef knew what to expect. He knew it was a savory ice. The diners thought it was going to be strawberry flavored and sweet. They got a disconfirmation of expectation, and in that disconfirmation of expectation, you go the other way and say, it tastes much saltier than it actually is, both at the time, and if I were to bring you back to the restaurant 2 weeks later and say, hey, you know what this dish is really now, forget what happened last time, just taste it afresh, you cannot. Your experience is linked intrinsically to that first exposure. So it's not enough to be the world's best chef to be able to deliver the perfectly seasoned dish. You need to know what's in the mind of your diners, and that's what happened here. And for the chef, what they found out with studies from the University of Sussex was that if you call this dish Food 386, change the name. Suddenly you think, Food 386, what is that? Is it something that maybe we send up to space with the astronauts? I don't know what it is. It's something that is enough for you to withhold your everyday expectations. You do taste it afresh, and with that label in mind, this will taste perfectly seasoned. The food's the same, what's in your mind is different, and the power of naming is clear to see. This happens in a very high-end restaurant. So it's exclusive, it's esoteric, most of us will never get the chance to eat there. I certainly couldn't on an academic salary. So who cares? Does it matter? I think it really does, because what happens in these kind of spaces is the most innovative, the most rapidly changing of all the spaces in which we have worked over the last 20 years. I've always been interested in the senses and the application of neuroscience, psychological science to the real world. And we've worked with car companies, bicycle lights, warning signals, paint companies. And in all those cases, they were interested in the neuroscience, but organizationally, they just couldn't change or implement in anything like as rapid a manner as one might like if you had what you thought was a real insight. By contrast, the chef, if he likes what you say and is interested, he can design something, put it on the menu next week, and you'll have real diners paying real money in a real environment for kind of an experiment. And that innovation happens much quicker in the food sector than elsewhere. But what happens there, I need to convince you, will percolate down to the mainstream. So Heston finds that the name of the dish is part of the experience. You can set expectations, and that goes exactly to the mainstream. I could share with you hundreds, probably now, of papers on the impact of naming on food choice, food behavior, liking, memorability. But my classic sort of example is this one, the Patagonian toothfish, that people have been trying to sell for a long time because it's sustainable, monster of the deep, it's reasonably cheap, but no one would order it on the menu in the restaurants. If I show you the picture, it's not going to help either. Pretty ugly thing. But change the name, Chilean sea bass, and suddenly, that's got kind of nicer associations. And in no time at all, in the UK restaurants, in North American restaurants, in Australian restaurants, and beyond, 1,200% increase in sales of exactly the same food, simply by changing the naming. Again, mainstream effect of naming now. When you go home tonight and cook dinner for your family, hopefully you'll think a little bit more carefully about the naming. Will you be able to make it taste 1,200% better? Probably not. Probably this is an exceptional case, but I think there's a lot of space to play with how we name the things that we create and that we serve. Experiment at the high end, translate to the mainstream. The other part for us is to go off the plate. Because it kind of always feels, I guess, to the food critic, the wine expert, the psychologist, the regular diner alike, that I can taste what's in the glass. And I read this research in the newspapers and they say, well, we change the music and it changes the taste. I changed the chair you're sitting on and I can make your spicy tofu even spicier. Nah, I can't. I mean, maybe they do it in some science lab somewhere, but it's not real, because I know what wine tastes like, and to me, it feels like I can taste what's in the glass. So none of us believe that everything else has an impact. But I need to convince you that it does, because once you realize that it does, you can start designing experiences that build on that. And to illustrate, I think we all hold these kind of contradictory beliefs. It feels to me like I can really taste the food. It doesn't feel to me like I'm influenced by everything else, the weight of the cutlery, the music. And yet, we've probably all had a version of the Provençal Rosé paradox moment, which is for Northern Europeans going to the Mediterranean on their summer holidays. It's nice, it's sunny, it's warm, you're happy, you're with your family, the wine tastes wonderful, so does the cheese and the meat. So nice, in fact, that you're tempted to buy a bottle, or 6, or a case, and ship it back home to share with your friends on a cold winter's evening. And when you do that, something changes. It doesn't taste the same. Same wine, but it tastes different. The experience is different. Why so? Is it something about the cold air in the cabin or in the hold of the plane? I think no, it's all about the power of the environment, our mood, and the context to change taste. And there are versions of this wherever you go in the world. I have Taiwanese students who say, tea, it tastes wonderful in England, and we take it back home for our parents for Christmas and presents, and it just doesn't taste the same. Is it in the water? Is it in the tea bags? No, it's all in here, I think. It's all about that we never taste blind, in a way. We're always affected by the environment that is around us, the mood and emotion that we're in. And the guy you just saw there is Denis Martin, 2 Michelin star chef from Beauvais in Switzerland. His restaurant is between Charlie Chaplin's final home on the lake and Nestlé headquarters. And with that kind of location, you can sort of imagine why most of the people who come through the doors are Swiss executives on account, stiff and buttoned up, in his words, Swiss businessmen who come in with a stern face. And he sort of realized that he can tell from the way they walk in whether or not they're going to enjoy his food. And when he sees them so stiff and buttoned up, they just don't get it. They just don't enjoy his food as much as he thinks that they should, given how much passion and effort he and his team puts into the creation process of local, organic, seasonal, molecular, and so on. And his solution, I think, is sort of brilliant and innovative. And it's this, because once you start thinking, it's the mental palate cleanser. Because once you start thinking about the pleasures of the table residing in the mind, not in the mouth, you start to question why. Why do all those fancy restaurants give us acidic sorbets to cut through? Why do I want to clean the tongue? Is the least interesting part of the tasting experience, I think. It's the mind that you want to cleanse before a meal. And the chef, Denis, done it this way, others do it other ways. You go to the restaurant, a single sitting, 30 cover more or less. Nice iron starched tablecloths when you sit down at 7 o'clock. There's no glasses, no plateware, no cutlery, no knives and no forks. Nothing, just one of these sitting center stage on each and every table. And of course, not everyone gets there at exactly 7 o'clock. Some come at 5 to, some at 5 past. But eventually the chairs and tables fill up. And then once everyone's arrived, people sort of sit there and 10 past 7 now, and everyone's here, so I guess the first dish will come out soon, won't it? But nothing will happen until some diner, curious as to what's going on, what this thing might be, will pick up this. Is it a Swiss kind of cheeky take on a salt and pepper shaker? Maybe twist the cow when you get some seasoning. You'll pick it up, turn it over to see what's underneath, and when you do that, you will hear the cow mooing, like Swiss cows should do. A cheap €1-2 plastic toy in a 2 Michelin star Swiss, very high-end restaurant. But in that moment, when you pick up the cow, when you're surprised by the moo, you'll laugh in surprise and shock. And then within a moment, and this happens night after night, you'll have a restaurant full of mooing cows. More importantly, you have a dining room full of laughing diners. You've broken the ice, you enhance the mood, and that's when the first dish comes out. It's a mental palate cleanser that really does make the food taste better, done intuitively by the chef. And kind of the question for us is to say, how can you take that insight and do something that would work outside Switzerland? It can't be the Swiss cow. But is there some other sort of mental palate cleanser we can design for any food experience? Is it the most funny video clip you've ever seen, or what might it be? The other part of the Provençal Rosé moment is not just the mood you're in, it's also the place you're in, the context, the environment. And here we have the Heston Blumenthal's take, the signature dish on the fat duck menu, for the last decade of the Sound of the Sea seafood dish that comes to the table looking like the sea with sashimi, foam, spume, seaweed on a lovely designed plate looking like the seashore. And on the other hand, the waiter will bring a conch shell out of which dribble some earbuds. You put those earbuds in, and you'll hear the sounds of the sea, the waves crashing on the beach, and a carefully calibrated number of seagulls squawking overhead. Not too dense an auditory atmosphere that it tells you where you are, but it's just enough cues for you to kind of project your own childhood memories, trigger nostalgia and so on, and happy childhood times, one hopes. But this dish comes out of research we did with Heston at an art and science conference in Oxford in 2007, where we served people oysters. When we played the sounds of the sea, they said that those oysters tasted better. No saltier, but significantly more enjoyable than when we played modern jazz or restaurant cutlery noises, as they are today at least. This has been sort of beautifully incorporated into a dish that I think is one of the first examples of technology being brought to the table to enhance the dining experience. And in contrast to all the stuff we've had for decades, you know, go back to the 1970s, and if you were a real chef, it's a white cube mentality. No music, no scents, no paintings on the walls, just white tablecloths and the food. If you're proud about your food, that's it. Don't distract them. And then there are other chefs out there from the Rainforest Cafe and the like, and the chain restaurants, the Hurricane Bar and Grill, where there was, a thunderstorm, a tropical rainstorm every 30 minutes during service, with tigers coming out of the undergrowth in the background of the restaurant. And if they're doing that, it can only mean one thing, can't it? It means the food is terrible, and they're trying to distract you from the food by giving you an experience instead. Today, the whole situation has changed, in part, perhaps, because of the San Pellegrino listing of the best 50 restaurants in the world, and that's all about experience. But look at those lists of the world's top restaurants, and you'll find many of them are doing this kind of intervention, doing brilliant things on the chefs with 2 Michelin stars, but who realize to deliver the total experience, it's both on the plate and off the plate, and they're wanting to know how to use technology and design, not just the design of the food, but the design of the total experience to create something memorable with a real stiction and hopefully enhance the taste at the same time. I could show you this. This is the final iteration of the dish. It came through various other forms that were tried on and off the restaurant menu. It didn't quite work. But what's noticeable to me is both how it illustrates the impact of the auditory context on what you're tasting. It's the first example of technology at table, but also when you put those earbuds in, these restaurants full of really excited diners for their once-in-a-lifetime meal, they can't stop talking. Put the earbuds in, and there's silence, absolute silence. And you see the diners with their attention kind of in a mindful moment, just focused on the dish. And part of why this dish works, I think, is that it focuses your mind, takes away the distraction, and by so doing, you can enhance the experience. It works for one dish. I don't think any more than that would kind of break the social dynamic of a meal that's so important. But for one dish at least, put the earbuds in and away you go. And now when we did this back in 2007 in Oxford, we thought we were going to be original, that no one had done this before. We only did it, in fact, because we had 150 people coming for a conference with some food. They'd paid £15 to see Heston speak. And then 2 days before, he came up to Oxford and he said, okay, what are we going to do? We hadn't sort of planned anything, so there's other things that are more important. So he said, okay, well, we'll just play the sounds of the sea and give people oysters, and who knows what will happen. Never believing it would work. And if we'd had time to plan it, or do all the ethical things, and this, that, and the other, we'd never have gone ahead. But in that kind of pressure moment where we had to do something, you do the crazy stuff sometimes, and occasionally it works. That led to the dish. We thought it was original, but in fact, go back to the 1930s, and you can find anything that you find in modernist cuisine today. It's all there. F.T. Marinetti and his colleagues were doing it. They were playing the sound of croaking frogs while serving frogs' legs in Milan, 1930. They were atomizing perfumes, the smell of carnations over the diners, into the diners' faces, 1930. Modern chefs are doing that today. They were having tactile dinner parties, rubbing velvet and silk and sandpaper while you ate without the aid of knives and forks, just burrowing your face in the plate, talking about syntactilismo. And that's, again, what chefs are doing today, like Joseph, who was here a couple of days ago. It's all there. The objective was different, and the food tasted horrible. It was ball bearings and perfume, and you don't want to go to like any of the centenary dinners of the futurist cookbooks. It's just disgusting. No one has a good word to say about the food. But the ideas around experience design were kind of there. They wanted to make things more multisensory, more stimulating, perhaps more artistic. So it starts in the 30s, it goes via psychiatric hospitals, in fact, were playing the sounds of the sea in the 1970s to help calm agitated patients, and so get them to eat a little bit better than they otherwise would, via the fat duck to Shanghai, to Chef Paul Paré, who was actually here in Maastricht 2 months ago in July, talking about his Sublimotion restaurant. 20-some courses, kind of bespoke dining experience. He's serving his fish and chips kind of dish. And he says, okay, you've got 19 more courses to come. There it is, at the fish and chips, just a little mouthful there. A stuffed caperberry. A dish that we thought was English, though it's actually Venetian, I guess, by origin, but we thought it was English, so it's sufficient for him, reminded of his time in England for some years before, to serve this dish, and it comes out with the sounds of the sea again. That's followed up by the sounds of the Beatles, quintessentially British group. We heard about priming before, priming you to notions of England. We're going to use the technology to project the British flag on the table, and we'll use the very same technology to project the English weather on the walls for that course alone. It's a very different experience. It's gone off the plate. I believe it's a very beautifully tasting thing in itself, but if you're going to charge $800 a head in Shanghai for dinner, it cannot be just about what goes in your mouth. It has to be the total experience. And this is great. This is really exciting stuff. This is Shanghai, opened 2011. Then we have the young upstart Paco Roncero in the ultraviolet Sublimotion, one's the one, in the Hard Rock Hotel in Ibiza. And you can see here 4 of the courses from, again, the world's most expensive meal, 1,500 euros a head. And you can see each course comes with different lighting, with different, perhaps, temperature, with different fragrance, with the waiters wearing different outfits, with different music. Everything changes. It's a kind of very designed experience. And I believe that those designs will change what you taste, how much you remember of the meal. And I'd love to test there. The thing is, at 1,500 euros a head, I'd need, I reckon, 80 participants. So that's kind of 5 evenings. That's, I don't know, $200,000 or something to actually do the experiment, and my department in Oxford is not going to pay those prices to allow me to answer that question. So we'll never know. But I think it is these chefs who are very creative on the plate who are now starting to tell stories through the technology and the environment in which those meals are served. But they weren't trained for that. They've got no idea what they're doing, in a way. They know they want to do it, but how do you tell stories? How do you construct meals that last 3, 4, 5 hours and maintain the audience's attention? You need to reach out to other kinds of creatives, set designers, theatre directors, storytellers, in order to be able to structure a 20, 30, 40, or even 50-course meal and not have people blown out of their minds by course 5 and, fuck, I've got another 45 courses to go. You can't have that. You need high points and low points, and in that is a whole area of development now, I think, of designing these theatrical, emotional, storytelling, magical kind of meal experiences. But we can't do it. Okay, so what can we do instead? As the psychologist interested in measuring the impact of the environment on the taste, we do things like this. Take 500 people to a gunmaker studio in Soho in London, 2013, November, give them a glass of whiskey and a scorecard. Pencil and paper, we're old-style researchers. Take them initially to the grassy room. We've got grass on the floor, deck chairs, the sound of the English summer, the lawnmowers, the baaing sheep. And we ask people, tell me about the nose of the whiskey. Tell me about the taste, the sweetness of the whiskey. Tell me about the texture of the aftertaste. How much do you like the decoration? How much do you like the whiskey right now, right here? Then take them, whiskey scorecard, 500 people, 3 nights, into the suite room. Everything round, everything pinkish red, tinkling high-pitched music coming from the ceiling, everything designed to enhance sweetness. And I'll go through some of the design work on this tomorrow in one of the workshops on the correspondences. Again, tell me about the nose, the taste, the texture, the home decoration, and your liking for the whiskey. Finally, into the woody room, everything woody we can think of in the background, double bass, creaking wood doors, log fires, wood on the walls, a dead tree behind you. Again, tell me about the taste, the smell, the texture, your liking, blah, blah. What happens? After 15 minutes, 500 people come out, and we were sort of worried. People will say, well, I know it's the same whiskey. It's been in my hand for 15 minutes. But they didn't. Some people said, I knew what you were trying to do. You wanted me to say the whiskey was grassier in the green room. That was so obvious. I did the opposite. We sort of got worried, but But when you average out 500 people's responses, in fact, you find that people are significantly impacted. They do rate the grassiness higher on the nose in the grassy room. They do taste more sweetness in the sweet room and more texture in the aftertaste in the woody room. They like it most in the woody room. And those who were there in this experience, funded by the Singleton, people like chefs at Long Clune in the Lake District, a very famous restaurant, went home and they were so impressed by the change in their own experience that they started serving their whiskey off wooden platters to try and capture a bit of this woody room because they knew it made a difference, and that's how they wanted their guests to experience the food. Okay, what else have we got? I think when thinking about food design, one needs to think about gastroporn, food porn, call it what you will, terms coined in the 1970s. To describe Paul Bocuse's cookery, actually, kind of nouvelle cuisine, but today things are wholly different. And it's sort of interesting in multiple levels. On the one hand, there's nothing that gets our brain going like food porn. Not real porn. You'll see the biggest increases in cerebral brain activity, the body's most bloodthirsty organ, increase by about 25% if you get a hungry participant and show them a picture of their favorite food, maybe waft the smell under their nose, and wow, what a change. Nothing else will do that to your brain. It's not even the eating of the food that gets your brain excited, it's the anticipation and the prediction beforehand. We work with cocktail makers in the Middle East, and they say it's bizarre. People are coming into our bars now, and they say, I want this. I say, well, what is that? Do you know what it is? Nope. Do you know what it's called? Nope. Do you know how much this drink costs? Nope. Do you even like, a coffee liqueur? Nope. But I want that because my friends have been here, they've tried it, and they've shared it, and I want the image of the thing. And so as a barista, a mixologist, a chef, you can't just, I think, these days serve tomato soup. Because no one wants to take a picture of that. You need to create designs that people want to share. And you can do that through beautiful plating. You can do that through silly plating on bricks and trowels and slates and flat caps, whatever, enough to get those social media shares. And that's kind of changing dining in some ways. It's even changing the design of plateware. This from a Tel Aviv restaurant at the top right. The perfect plate for the gastroporn generation with a little holder there for your mobile device. You get no camera wobble. And then look, the back of the plate, beautifully curved, so you don't need to see any of those other annoying guests in the space. Restaurants has since closed down, I'm told, but still shows what is possible and what people are starting to think about. What is the most Instagrammable dish? Or in our hands with Chef Joseph, can we do the opposite? Because once you've seen the dish and it's been shared on social media, where's the surprise? Where's the excitement? Where's the reveal? So we're trying to make the un-Instagrammable dish, serving a dish from your mobile device so you cannot take a picture of it, and you have to be there to experience the thing. So eye appeal is key. It's getting more important. It does make things taste better, I think. That's the claim. That's the hope. But does it really? Because many chefs are now going for very artistic plating, both on and off the plate. To sort of probe this space, we've been working with a chef, Charles Michel from Colombia, Franco-Colombian chef, who gets very upset that in his native Colombia, bordering on the Amazon basin, none of the Colombians want to eat Colombian ingredients. They have the most amazing fruits, the most amazing insects, the most amazing stuff to eat, but they all want French, Italian, Peruvian stuff. So he's on a mission to try and change the way people think about his own food. And to do that, he's going to come up with a Kandinsky on a canvas, Kandinsky on a plate dish. Because he's sort of in that space of these creative chefs who, when he was in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, saw Kandinsky's 201 painting hanging. Actually hangs the other way up, if you're familiar with the painting. But as a chef, he said, that mushroom, it's got to be upright. An upside-down mushroom just wouldn't work. So if you excuse him that liberty, he's seeing that Kandinsky is trying to paint and communicate emotion through color and form. And he's saying, I'm a chef. Am I also an artist? Looks beautiful, looks stunning, is shared on social media. That bit's good. But does it taste better? And might it nudge people towards healthier food? And I want to say again, how does this work really get done? Here we have just a lab dinner in Oxford, kind of once a month. And you can see Chef Charles Michel plating up 12 canvases, because plates are kind of boring, and you're eating a painting, so it should be off a painter's canvas. And forget the knife and fork, that's so boring too. We'll have a paintbrush. Flat, big, fat paintbrush is the best. It stimulates your lips like you wouldn't believe. Much more effective at getting the paint off the canvas, and you're left with your own modernist artwork at the end. And this is kind of the exploratory space. The chef has created something interesting, and we're sort of scaling it in a very loose environment to see whether it works. How do people respond in a home, a cozy kind of dining environment? And when we find there that artistic plating makes food taste better, that you're willing to pay more for it, then we go to a restaurant or a cafe. So here we have the version, the light version for 160 diners in Somerville College, Oxford, where I teach. And if you've got to do 160 covers at once, you can't do the full thing, and they wouldn't afford the canvas. So it's on plates, but you sort of get the idea, Kandinsky-inspired, or the same ingredients, just tossed. It's lazy, it's easy, and you can see the double link in the willingness to pay for exactly the same food on exactly the same day in exactly the same place, simply as a function of plating. And then you can do the maths, and you can say, is it worth the extra time it would take to do that kind of plating in terms of the return in investment of what people will pay for my meals? Maybe the answer is yes, maybe no, but you've got a method for assessing the impact. And that's the important thing for us. Again, we don't design the food, but sort of provide the connection between the chef, the creative, the measurement science, and being aware of some of the factors that one might need to worry about in the thing. And what else can we do? Then we can sort of, we're getting a lot into online research, going beyond the weirdos we can get ready access to in Oxford. So here we're working with a chef, Albert Landgraf, from Restaurant Apiece, Sao Paulo, one of South America's top up-and-coming chefs. I've never met him in person, only over the internet. And this is his signature dish. This is his bit of gastro-porn shared around the world. For me, as a visual vision scientist, I'm interested in that color contrast and the fact that all the onions are pointing the same way. And you ask the chef, this dish is all over the world on social media. How did you design it? Is it random? He said, no, I thought about it. How did you go about deciding what the design should be? He says, well, I sort of played around with the bits for a while, and it sort of felt right to me. We say, this is such an important image for your restaurant and your brand. Are you happy to rely on it felt right to me? Or would you like some evidence to back it up? So with his permission, we take his dish and do what many of us do in restaurants anyway, when the waiter puts something down in front of us, and sometimes you kind of pick up the plate and just tilt it a little bit. It doesn't change the taste, but you just kind of do something to make it your own or to get the right alignment. So we have hundreds of people doing this online. We say, imagine you're going to Albert's restaurant tonight. He's going to serve you this dish. It comes on the screen spinning to have no start point, and say, how would you like those onions served? We're going to pay you 6 cents, no matter what you say. So maybe you don't care. Maybe you say, I want 6 cents, bam, that's it. The faster I respond, the quicker I can do the next experiment. But it turns out not to be that way. People do seem to respond responsively and with systematic biases in their judgment. So here, we put this dish online, 6 o'clock one night, we go to the pub, and before it's time to go back to get the second pint, 250 people, each person a dot on the screen saying their preferred orientation. Next morning, 2,500 people with their preference, and you can see most of them. The chef's kind of got it almost right. He said 12 o'clock was the perfect orientation. 2,500 people at a cost of $100 collected in less than 24 hours say 4 minutes past 12. Just past 12 o'clock. Probably close enough for him not to worry, in fact. He got it more or less right intuitively. So he did not need the science, the measurement science in this case, but it's a process that he can create a dish, try out some designs, and we can measure it and feed back by the next morning in a very cheap manner. That's the important thing for us. And then we can take his dish and do all sorts of other designs and say, what would happen? What would people say? How much would they pay if we put those onions pointing in, pointing out, pointing up, pointing down, 1, 3, odd or even, on the left, asymmetric, who knows? Measure the preference, measure willingness to pay, and feed it back, so to help in the kind of design process. The ingredients, the combination, we have nothing to say about, but the eye appeal, we can use the power of the internet to help, I think. And I want to say there are some times when the chef gets it wrong, or when the chef should probably think a bit more about their decisions. So many chefs these days want to do asymmetric plating. All the food shifted to one side of the plate, the other side blank. You ask them, why are you doing that? I don't know, I saw somebody else doing it. It looks kind of cool. It looks different. It's not the way it has been done. But everything I know from the psychology of the visual arts says we like balance and harmony, and asymmetric stuff's just all wrong. So what's the answer? Well, we and others have been serving dishes like this, seasonal ox cheek with vegetables, centered or asymmetric. And it turns out people were willing to pay more for the symmetrically plated food. If I ask you how creative you think the chef is, you'll say he's more creative on the right, or she. So you think the chef's more creative, but you reduce the willingness to pay. And again, then we have the numbers to say, as a chef, is that what you want? Do you care about the price you pay, or do you want to be seen as the most creative? No right answer, but with evidence in hand, you can maybe make better kinds of decisions. But I should say, maybe we need to be a little bit cautious, because that study, I mean, from the dish itself, you can kind of tell it's not 2 Michelin star stuff. This is Somerville College, Oxford, with the limits of the chefs there. And so when you eat that dish in this context, where we can test 160 people at once, there's a certain context there. Those wood panels, those old ladies staring sternly down from the walls at you does something. I dine there every day. It does something terrible to you. And maybe in that context, asymmetric plating is just all wrong. In a modernist restaurant, yes, it could work, but in that context, perhaps not. And then I'm kind of a challenge. I'd love to test in a modernist restaurant, but how can I do so, given I can't afford the price of admission for 80 people? So always a tension, but I think we've got as close as we can from the online, from the lab, and from some kind of real-world environment. A few other things to think about. We think a lot, mostly about the off-the-plate stuff, and things that you never think about, but really matter. Everything from the color of the plate, this work with Ferran Adria's Alicia Foundation, showing that exactly the same. This is strawberry mousse this time. Your eyes were not deceiving you, but it tastes 7% sweeter, 9% more flavorful, and 13% more liked on the white plate than exactly the same food does on the black. This was 2012, 60 diners. Since then, 2017 now, there are 30 published studies showing you can't taste the plate, but the color of the plate or the package changes your tasting experience, sets expectations, and who wouldn't want 7% sweetness without the calories? But for Ferran, it doesn't really matter. Because if you're going to, well, his restaurant's closed down for one thing, but if it was still open, you're going for the once-in-a-lifetime meal and you don't care about the calorie count, LBE. But the food producers do. And if you're selling, so imagine 1 million packed lunches every day as a supermarket, you've got a yogurt, a sandwich, a bag of crisps, and a drink. Have you ever thought about the color of the packaging of the yogurt pot or of the spoon? Mostly people have not. But if we can demonstrate, and we have demonstrated that serving that yogurt of a particular color of spoon enhances sweetness, even if only by a tiny amount, multiply that by 1 million people a day, and you've got something that might be of interest out there in the real world. To normal people, but also for us, ultimately, taking the findings from the high end, from the Alicia Foundation to the home, and then out to those who may be more vulnerable, so those in care, and many of those older people, dementia, Alzheimer's, who are not eating enough, whose hospital stays are being extended precisely because of the fact they do not eat sufficient nutrition in hospital. What can we do? We can bring the famous chefs in, but that costs money. But maybe simply by changing the color of the plate, we can increase consumption in this vulnerable group by 1/3, and this from a study done in a hospital in the UK showing just that. And many startups now designing colorful cutlery, plateware for the elderly to enhance the consumption. Okay. And this is one that just sort of popped out, thinking about this changing. Getting people to eat more is valuable for some section of the population. Getting them to eat less is also sort of valuable. And this just came out from the Royal College of Arts, I think last month. It was in their papers. Design students thinking about food, material design, plateware, and saying, if it looks like there's twice as much food, because I've got a mirror halfway through the plate, will I eat less, but be no less satisfied? A nice solution, beautifully designed. And so the challenge for us, we've been in touch with the designers to say, can we get some of your stuff and we'll do the experiment to see if it really matters? And if so, does it matter for a day? A year later, would your brain still be fooled by a mirror? Surely not, but maybe. And this is a great space between the design and the measurement science to say, how much of an value does this have? You need to kind of document it, measure it, I believe. And then just a couple of other things. One about cutlery. I mean, when you look around the world of food and drink, there's so much stuff, low-hanging fruit we call it, that no one looks at. Over the last century, there have been, I don't know how many thousands of studies of the liquid in the glass. Its color, its smell, its texture, its temperature, everything about the drink. How many studies have there been of glassware, of cups, of bowls, of mugs? 20. And 15 of those are all in the world of wine. There's virtually no published research on coffee cups, for example, or tea cups. There's virtually nothing on cutlery, the stuff that always mediates between us and the food. And as of 2010, there had never been a published study of the psychology, the impact of cutlery on taste. Low-hanging, it's there in front of us all the time, but no one bothered to study it. We think it's really important. Chefs are starting to play with it. And again, you see from a lab dinner in Oxford, we've got the chef Charles Michel with my wife's fancy cutlery, covering it in the pelt of the hare from the market, serving a hare kind of soup. It's very textured. It puts you in contact with the animal that you're eating, makes you think differently. Are you sure you want to eat it? You can smell the beast there. Very sort of multisensory, very memorable. I can still remember exactly the day and my wife's face when she saw that, what had been done to her heirloom cutlery. But it starts there in this fun, interactive environment with a bit of design, good food, and a bit of psychology and measurement science. And from there it ends up here, back at the Fat Duck at one of the world's top restaurants, on the final course on the menu, challenging the design of cutlery. A dish called Counting Sheep Going to Sleep. It floats miraculously in midair, spinning. And this spoon, when you see it, when you pick it up, you can imagine already how much effort you'd have to put in to picking that thing up. But you'd be wrong, because it's got lead weights in it. It's heavier than you expect, because heavier than expected seems to connote value. It's also furry, a nice touch back to the futurists and our research in the lab. And it also has scent inside, the scent of baby powder, heliotropin, Johnson & Johnson's. Some like it, some don't. It's kind of a one-off experience again, but I think it's people challenging the space, saying this matters, it's not been studied, and how can we optimize based on the neuroscience to deliver something better. Maybe we can all go home and start wrapping our cutlery in bubble wrap and go to the market and get some funny animal textures. Or maybe it's going to be something like this, and this sort of space of design that I really want to play with the spoon of the spoon. And this is commercially available from Studio William, but they've got to make 750 sets in order to make it efficient for them to actually do the process at all. And they've got these beautiful to look at spoons, and the question is, what does that do to your taste perception? Are there certain combinations of flavors that work well? And now we have the spoons out there, designed by trial and error. I was with the sort of silversmith who said I just beat some patterns into it, stuck it on my tongue, and that felt nice, and then we went with that. There's a more scientific approach about trying to have these things that are designed but are mass marketable, but still open to innovation is sort of a challenge, I think, for us and for others. So finally, I want to come back and leave you with a little bit on the technology. Going from the high-end sound of the sea, the once-in-a-lifetime MP3 player in a conch shell, taking it to the mainstream with the House of Wolf, a restaurant in North London, $50 a head. We've got a sound course. Please take out your mobile device, dial 0845 680 something if you want to make your dessert more bitter, or dial 0845 on your mobile device, your technology in your pocket to add a bit of sonic seasoning to make things taste sweeter. So here we have a diner in the restaurant eating a bittersweet chocolate lolly. He's got their own technology there, and they're listening to a soundscape carefully designed on the basis of lab research with a sound design agency. You might think, is that bitter or is that sweet? There's no literal answer to that question, but if I play the other sound, I think, is that the bitter or the sweet sound? Then 80-some% of people will say that's sweet. Tinkling high pitch is kind of sweeter. I don't know why, but it is. It just feels that way. That was a dish on the menu, bringing out 5 to 10% sweetness. So we've gone from the 3 Michelin star once-in-a-lifetime meal to your technology now in your pocket in a high street restaurant. And from there, we go mainstream with the brands. So if you're a food takeout, Just Eat, Deliveroo, one of those, Munchery and Google Play, they're all starting to get in on the space. They're saying, wow, if sound can really change your experience of food, and we're delivering the ingredients, the pre-chopped stuff, the final meal, a Michelin-starred meal direct to your door, then shouldn't we be delivering the total experience? Not just the food in the Tupperwares and the cartons, and if so, maybe we can deliver downloads or CDs to go with the food. That is happening now, and that would never have happened if it hadn't been, I think, for what happened before at the high end. And I'll leave you just with two things of other approaches to technology at table. We have the dining from a tablet on the bottom and augmented reality sushi on the top. Work with Japanese colleagues for a time when we fished the seas to extinction of the real stuff. Maybe you can just put the headset on, wave your hand over the food, and get the kind of sushi you really want. And given that sushi is primarily taste, texture-driven rather than aroma-driven, maybe you will be fooled by your eyes into tasting what's no longer available in the seas. Maybe more immediately, why not use tablets as plates, given that some of them are now dishwasher safe, waterproof. You see Andreas Caminada in Switzerland in his restaurant, Michelin-starred restaurant, kind of an ironic take, serving off a tablet, but making it look like a white plate, so why bother? But it's kind of exploring the design space, seeing whether people enjoy it or not. For ourselves, we're thinking about the sounds of the sea, actually looking at the seashore. Again, it's technology that's around us, it's already available. How can we reposition it to do something and bring it into the home environment. And very lastly, what we're currently working a lot on is taking ideas from the psychology, from the neuroscience, and trying to design them into an edible experience. So for the last year, we've been working with Chef Joseph Youssef, and I would go down to him and say, look, in my psychology books, there's images like this, classic from the 1960s, meaningless pattern of blobs and splotches. People don't see anything, but then you stare, and eventually you see the Dalmatian dog in the leaves. The legs here, a leg here, the head pointing down, sniffing the ground, and leaves elsewhere. This is a classic image. You can't see anything in the noise, and then eventually your brain makes sense of it, and suddenly it locks in, all in a moment. And then, once you've seen the Dalmatian, if you don't see this picture again for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, when you see it again, you will immediately see the Dalmatian. You can never go back. Your brain has been fundamentally changed. In a way, you think, is that true of flavors? I'm tasting some stuff in my mouth, this wine, I don't know where it came from, and then suddenly I get it. It suddenly locks in. That was where I was, that's the wine, that's the vintage. Who knows? So I showed it to the chef, so this is great. There are lots of examples like this from the visual illusions, visual psychophysics literature. Could we do an edible version? And do one in a way that's going to shift us towards more sustainable food behaviors. And he came up with this, called the Picasso dish, which had been serving in London restaurants for dinner over the last year. So it's the only meat course on a 9-course menu, and the chef wants you to think about where the food came from. I can put the hair pelt on your cutlery, or in this case, it's a duck dish. So he comes out from the kitchen and will say, I'm a chef who thinks I'm an artist, or dabbling in that space. And I see, Picasso, you would say, every act of creation begins with an act of destruction. And isn't that what I do? I take the whole duck and I destroy it to make something beautiful on the plate. And then you come in and destroy that. Okay, so that's kind of the aim I'm thinking in this space. But before I can serve you the dish, I've just got to go and catch the duck. And then he wanders off into the kitchen. And we have this sound-designed duckscape, if you will. And he's making you think in a fun, engaging manner about what you're about to eat. And out comes a plate. So it's fun, it's engaging, it's interactive, it's multisensory, both on and off the plate. It's got a message about, do you really want to eat that duck? And if you're not happy about what happened to the animal, well, don't. It's also got a bit of the psychology in, because maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. There's an image in the plate, just like there was the Dalmatian in the leaves. It comes to the table like this, served upside down, as it were. Then anyone can see who or what is in your plate of food. And we're all in the kitchen saying, it's so obvious, it just won't work. And again, most people can't see it initially. We have diners of 24 people at the table, 4 services, and how many people see it initially? Put your hands up. Anyone see something? 1, 2. So we got 4 out of 100 can see who's in the plate to begin with. Then we say, look across the table, because in fact this is an upside-down dish. And when you look across the table, you're going to see this way up. We're playing with a face inversion effect. And then a few more people get it, but still some don't. They sort of say, yeah, I can sort of see something in the plate. Maybe it's a Rorschach block. You say, no, you haven't seen it yet. Because if you had seen it, you go, there it is. So we'll take away the extraneous stuff, the duck, and then just reflect that part. And maybe you can see Pablo Picasso in silhouette staring out at you from the plate. Some people just can never see him, and I want to study those a bit more. And that becomes a response in the restaurant. It's kind of non-invasive testing. When people go, waitress notes it down, and we say how many people get it in what percentage of time. So it's non-invasive testing in the restaurant, playing with the psychology, but with a sustainable message. And hopefully now, when you go back to the original dish, you cannot not see what you've seen. It'll be there, and you're changed forever after this meal. It's also a most Instagrammable of dishes, and that's playing into the gastro porn thing as well. So I shall leave it there, but hopefully giving you a sense of why I think the new science of eating is really exciting, taking the techniques from the psychology lab, from the psychophysics lab, out into the real world. There are challenges around ecological validity, but I think there are so many basic, fundamental experiments about flavor, about food, that psychologists have never taken a look at. I see a whole world of design students at the RCA in London and elsewhere who are really interested now in designing the all-new cutlery, plateware, food interaction, playful interaction. There's chefs who I think they're artists playing on the plate with the experience. So a lot of interest and hunger, and I think it's our job, or my job, my group's job, to try and just be the connection between the creatives, the designers in the kitchen of the plateware, and the consumer, the diner, the person at home, the person in hospital, and try and measure the impact and provide some suggestions about design decisions that might enhance, make things more memorable, make them more stimulating, but ultimately, hopefully, more sustainable both for us as individuals and for the planet as a whole. Thank you.